I'm not going to speak for very long because I'm sort of standing in for CCPS, Community Care Providers Scotland, and we should really thank them because they've worked with us on this and they've done a lot of work on family support. If you look up their website, there's a very good report on family support. So part of my job, apart from filling in, was to stimulate debate or to tell you what we could talk about next. But from the previous session, I don't think there's really going to be a tremendous problem with that. So I wanted to do probably two things. One was to say why we wanted to have this conversation, why we wanted to invite Region Anna. And I think the reason for that, as John has said, we're a partnership of family organisations. And we meet together in our steering group sessions. And each of the organisations talks about what's happening to families and to their organisations. And increasingly, as the years have gone on, what's been happening to families is poverty, is not enough resources. And what's been happening to their organisations is lack of resources, cuts, and inability to tackle that. And then you hear individual stories. I remember Liz is from Aberlour, at a steering group meeting talking about a young woman that came to them, a young woman who was pregnant and about to have a child, and really without very much conversation about her ability to look after that child or about what support could be put in place, local authority was threatening to take the child into care. I remember Tricia, who's from Scottish Association of Social Workers. We've been working together, looking at a task force on learning disabled parents, and we had a seminar. They have an astounding number of, I think it's a real human rights issue, about 60% of children, of learning disabled parents have their children taken out of them. And Tricia was telling a story which I thought was absolutely shocked me really. And that was about someone that she'd had a call from a social worker who said, I've been instructed by my line manager to take this person, this parent with learning disability, child into care. And the shocking thing about that was that the line manager nor the social worker had ever met the parent. And actually, we need to be better than that. And we get phone calls sometimes at Parent Across Scotland. We're not a service-based organisation, but we get calls from parents who say to us, we've had contact with social work and they're threatening us with child protection measures or to take my children into care. They've told me that what I need to do is a parenting programme. And they're ringing us to say, can you tell me where there's a parenting programme so I can go and do it? And they haven't even been told that. So I didn't really want me and these things are not great. So I suppose the things I wanted to say really without here. I think we really need to start thinking again. We talk about parenting. It's very ironic. I come from an organisation called Parenting Across Scotland. I don't like the word parenting. Do any of us as parents ever say, I parent my child? Of course we don't. And it's not a task. It's a relationship. It sort of consumes everything that we do. It's about where we live, how we go to work, how we, it's the relationship between our children and ourselves, and we need to recognise that for families. And part of that is the relationship with poverty and realising that people need enough resources to live. And I think that supporting families is bigger than family support. We can talk about family support, but actually supporting families is your housing right? Is your education right? Is your income enough? And we need to start at the place where families are, say to families, what help do you need? Where do we start? And enter that conversation. But I think we need to sort of develop new models, and I think it is happening, and Sally-Ann was talking about good practice in the third sector, which I absolutely recognise. It needs to be good practice in the state sector as well. And the problem sometimes about good practice in the third sector is that it's isolated, it's postcode lottery, and it's very, very vulnerable to cuts in local authority funding because it tends to be what goes first. And I suppose just saying, when you sort of go into family homes and say, actually, here's a programme, we're going to make things better, you're not doing things right. Actually, if people don't know how they're going to pay their bills, if they don't, that for lots of people is the most important thing. It's about how you pay your bills, how you, get clothes, shoes for your children. And increasingly, John certainly knows the figures that he gave, we're moving more and more into situations where teachers are getting together at schools and talking about, how to buy a pair of shoes for candidates. So, I think some of the opportunities are in policy. I was just going to put a few pointers about some of the things that are happening. Some of them are in practice. I suppose one of the problems about relationship practice is two things, I think. One is resources and time, and the other one is because of increasing poverty, there's a huge increase in inequality, and that difference in the power relationship between the professionals and the family does not make for easy relationships, when relationships are based on feelings of superiority and inferiority and on fear and so on. We have to involve families to address that point, and we have to reframe the narrative, we have to tell different stories, and we have to get family stories heard. I think some of the opportunities that we have, one of them is incorporation of the UNCRC. I think that, everybody who's been working for this in Scotland was probably delighted when they heard Nicola Sturgeon say this, apart from perhaps some civil servants who've now got a lot of work to do very quickly, but we shouldn't let them slack on that one. I think it's absolutely important that it happens. Sometimes I think there's sort of seen as being a bit of tension between the UNCRC and parents and families. And I would say two things. One is that right at the beginning of the preamble of the UNCRC, it places children very firmly in the context of families. It says that's where they should be. And the state's duty then, and this is particularly pertinent, I think, to poverty, is the state's duty then is to provide them with the resources to do so and support them. That can be income, that can be housing, it can be education. Julietta together has often said to me that actually the number of times that parents are mentioned in the UNCRC is actually more than the amount that children are mentioned. They are seen as the upholders of children's rights. And I think that apart from the rights, participation and giving a voice to children, it's very much protective of families, and we should be using the rights to campaign and to push for those things. We shouldn't be campaigning them, they should be upheld in law. The Child Poverty Act, I think the thing that we really need to do there around implementation is to make sure it is much more integrated with families and with that kind of support in families elsewhere. The Care Review, I'm really pleased to see Ewan Aitken, who is CEO of Iranian, and he also has a role as chair of one of the work streams of the Care Review. And that work stream is the edges of care. And I suppose I would argue that the edges of care can be anywhere. They can be through poverty, they can be through bereavement, they can probably happen to any of us at any time, any family. So it's really important that what we do is not talk about edges of care, but we talk about supporting families so that actually that we can stay together. If we had much fewer families, many fewer families, who actually went into care, perhaps we have a smaller care population, perhaps we'd have more resources to spend on them and make things better. But actually, UNCRC Care Review, where it's safe and where it's possible, and I think it's possible more than we currently see, we should be enabling and supporting families to stay together. Part 12 of the 2014 Act is actually about providing families with support where there's a possibility of them being looked after. Louise Hill at Strathclyde University has just done a review of that, which talks very much about relationships, about family support. I'd urge you to read that. I think I'm just going to finish by talking about the UNCRC, where it says the family as the fundamental group, I am going to read it all out because I love this. The family as the fundamental group in society and the natural environment for the growth and well-being of all its members, and particularly children, should be provided the necessary protection and assistance. I think when that's law, when the UNCRC was incorporated, the things that we have been talking about tonight, it goes beyond, it affords protections and affords families proper resources.